What would you do if you knew you had only a few years left to live? If each breath was a gift, each note sung a farewell? This is the story of a man who, even knowing that time was running out, chose to shine with an intensity that few mortals can achieve. This is the story of Freddie Mercury, the man behind the most powerful voice in rock history. In the autumn of 1991, in the gardens of Garden Lodge, his Kensington mansion, a frail man watched the leaves fall from the trees. His eyes, once bright and full of life, now carried the weight of a secret that the whole world suspected but that he refused to confirm. Freddie Mercury was dying, and he knew it. The final days of the king. During the last months of his life, Freddie became a shadow of the extravagant showman who had conquered the world. His body, which had once danced on stages with the energy of 1,000 thunders, now weighed only 99 pounds. The clothes, once chosen to impress crowds, now served only to hide the fragility of a man fighting an invisible enemy. But here's what made Freddie Mercury extraordinary. Even in his weakest moments, the fire within him refused to be extinguished. Those who visited Garden Lodge during those final days spoke of a man who still possessed an almost supernatural magnetism. His voice, though weakened, could still command attention with a whisper. His eyes, despite the pain, still held that mischievous spark that had captivated millions. Jim Hutton, his partner during those final years, later described how Freddie would spend hours by his piano, his fingers barely able to press the keys, yet still creating melodies that seemed to come from another world. It was as if he was trying to pour everything he had left into those final compositions, knowing that each song might be his last gift to humanity. The mansion had become both sanctuary and prison. The world's media camped outside, desperately seeking confirmation of what everyone suspected. Photographers climbed walls, reporters bribed neighbors, and tabloids printed increasingly wild speculation. Yet inside those walls, Freddie maintained the dignity that had always defined him, refusing to become a spectacle in his final act. His cats, Delilah, Goliath, Lily, Miko, Oscar, Romeo, Tiffany, Tom, and Jerry, became his constant companions. He would speak to them for hours, sharing secrets that no human ears would ever hear. Perhaps they were the only ones who truly understood that beneath the legend lived a man who simply wanted to love and be loved. The physical pain was relentless. The opportunistic infections that came with his condition attacked his body from every angle. Pneumonia, skin lesions, and a weight loss that made him almost unrecognizable to those who had known him in his prime. Yet those closest to him marveled at his mental strength. He refused to let the disease define his final chapter. From Farouk to Freddie, the birth of a legend. But who was this man before he became the voice of a generation? To understand Freddie Mercury's death, we must first understand his extraordinary life. Born Farouk Bulsara on September 5, 1946, on the exotic island of Zanzibar, he came into the world already carrying the spirit of wanderlust that would define his existence. His father, Bomi Bulsara, worked for the British government, and his mother, Jer, was a woman of quiet strength who would later become one of her son's greatest supporters. From the very beginning, Farouk was different. While other children played with toys, he was drawn to music like a moth to flame. At the age of 8, he was sent to boarding school in India to St. Peter's School in Panchgani. It was there, far from his parents, that the shy boy began to discover the power of his voice. The school's music teacher noticed something special about young Farouk. His voice had a range and power that was almost supernatural for a child. But it wasn't just his voice that set him apart. He had an innate sense of showmanship that seemed to come from nowhere. During school performances, while other children stood stiffly and sang, Farouk commanded the stage as if he had been born to it. His classmates gave him the nickname Freddie, and somehow it felt more like his real name than the one his parents had given him. The political upheaval in Zanzibar during the 1960s forced the Bulsara family to flee to England, settling in the London suburb of Feltham. For teenage Farouk, now calling himself Freddie, this wasn't just a geographical move, it was a transformation. England in the swinging 60s was the perfect incubator for someone with his artistic vision and boundless ambition. Art College at Ealing introduced him to a world of creative possibilities. He studied graphic design, but his real education was happening in the clubs and pubs of London, where he discovered the raw power of rock and roll. The Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Aretha Franklin, each artist became a teacher, showing him different aspects of what music could be. The formation of a dynasty. Have you ever witnessed the moment when destiny reveals itself? For Freddie, that moment came when he met Brian May and Roger Taylor, two musicians from a band called Smile. They were talented, but something was missing. When Freddie first saw them perform, he knew immediately what that missing piece was: him. The story goes that after their performance, Freddie approached them with the confidence of someone who had never known doubt. "I'm going to join your band," he announced, as if it were already decided by the universe itself. Brian and Roger were intrigued by this flamboyant character with the incredible teeth and even more incredible self-assurance. But Freddie had conditions. The band would need a new name, something grander, something that reflected the royal ambitions he had for them. After considering various options, he suggested Queen. It was perfect, regal, memorable, and deliciously ambiguous. Some questioned whether the name might pigeonhole them, but Freddie understood something about human psychology. People are drawn to what they perceive as powerful. The addition of bassist John Deacon completed the lineup that would go on to create some of the most innovative and beloved music in rock history. Each member brought something unique: Brian's guitar genius and astrophysics background, Roger's powerful drumming and high harmonies, John's steady bass and technical wizardry, and Freddie's voice and vision that could turn any song into an epic. Their early years were marked by struggle and determination. They played in pubs to audiences of 20 people, slept in their tour van, and survived on whatever money they could scrape together. But Freddie never doubted their destiny. Even when record labels rejected them, even when critics dismissed them as too theatrical, too different, he maintained an unshakable belief that they were meant for greatness. The Bohemian Revolution. Then came the song that would change everything. In 1975, Freddie presented his bandmates with a 6-minute masterpiece that defied every convention of popular music. Bohemian Rhapsody was opera, rock ballad, and heavy metal anthem all rolled into one impossible creation. Record executives declared it commercial suicide. No radio station would play a 6-minute song with no chorus. But Freddie had learned something crucial about his audience. They were hungry for something different, something that treated them as intelligent beings capable of appreciating complexity and beauty. When Bohemian Rhapsody was released, it didn't just become a hit. It became a cultural phenomenon that proved popular music could be art without sacrificing its power to move people. The accompanying music video, filmed on a shoestring budget, became one of the most iconic visual pieces in music history. Freddie's face, emerging from darkness with that knowing smile, became an image burned into the collective consciousness. The song stayed at #1 for 9 consecutive weeks, and suddenly, Queen weren't just a band, they were revolutionaries. Success brought new challenges. The pressure to follow up such an unprecedented success was enormous. Some artists might have played it safe, but Queen did the opposite. They pushed further into uncharted territory with albums like A Day at the Races and News of the World, each one showcasing their refusal to be contained within any single genre. Freddie's stage presence during this period was nothing short of supernatural. He commanded arenas with the authority of an emperor, turning every concert into a communion between performer and audience. His costumes became increasingly elaborate, from flowing capes to skin-tight leotards that showcased his dancer's physique. He understood that rock and roll wasn't just about music, it was about creating moments of transcendence. The price of perfection. But behind the glittering facade, Freddie was wrestling with demons that fame couldn't silence. His perfectionism was both his greatest strength and his heaviest burden. He would spend countless hours in the studio, pushing himself and his bandmates to achieve a sound that existed only in his mind. Stories circulated about his demands for dozens of takes, his insistence on details that others considered insignificant. His personal life became increasingly complex as his fame grew. The relationship with Mary Austin, whom he called the love of his life, ended when he finally accepted his sexuality, but their bond remained unbreakable. She became his confidant, his anchor to reality in a world where he was increasingly seen as more myth than man. The early 80s brought both triumph and turmoil. Queen's performance at Live Aid in 1985 is still considered one of the greatest live performances in rock history. For 20 minutes, Freddie held Wembley Stadium and the world in the palm of his hand, proving that he was not just a great rock star but a force of nature. Yet even at the height of his powers, those closest to him noticed changes. The endless touring, the pressure to constantly exceed expectations, the personal struggles he kept hidden from the world, they were all taking their toll. He began to withdraw from the spotlight, spending more time in Munich and New York, seeking something that fame and success couldn't provide. The shadow approaches. In the mid-1980s, whispers began to circulate. Freddie's appearance at public events became increasingly rare. When he did appear, careful observers noted that he looked thinner, more fragile. The vibrant complexion that had once glowed under stage lights now seemed to require more makeup to achieve the same effect. The emergence of AIDS as a global epidemic cast a shadow over the entire entertainment industry, particularly affecting the communities that Freddie frequented. Friends and colleagues began disappearing, victims of a disease that was still poorly understood and heavily stigmatized. For someone as private about his personal life as Freddie, the climate of fear and prejudice made openness impossible. Yet he continued to create. The album, A Kind of Magic, showcased a more introspective Freddie, one who seemed to be grappling with mortality even as he maintained his public persona. Songs like Who Wants to Live Forever took on prophetic significance, as if he was trying to prepare the world for what was coming. The decision to stop touring came not from exhaustion or lack of desire, but from a pragmatic understanding of his limitations. The voice that had once filled stadiums with effortless power was becoming harder to sustain. Rather than disappoint audiences with a diminished performance, he chose to end Queen's touring career at its peak. The final creative burst confined increasingly to the studio, Freddie threw himself into what would become Queen's final album with him, Innuendo. Working with his characteristic intensity, he poured everything he had left into songs that seemed to sum up not just his career, but his entire understanding of what it meant to be human. The title track, Innuendo, was a 6-minute epic that showcased every aspect of his artistry. The operatic voice, the theatrical sensibility, the deep understanding of how music could convey emotion beyond words. But it was The Show Must Go On that would become his most poignant farewell, a defiant declaration of artistic commitment even in the face of physical collapse. Brian May later revealed that Freddie could barely stand when they recorded that song, yet his voice on the final take possessed a power and clarity that seemed to come from somewhere beyond physical capability. "I'll face it with a grin," he sang, and those who knew his condition understood they were witnessing something sacred, an artist transcending his mortality through the pure force of creative will. The Great Revelation. On November 23, 1991, after years of speculation and denial, Freddie finally released a statement confirming what the world had suspected. He had AIDS. The announcement was characteristically dignified and direct, asking only for privacy in his final days and for understanding about why he had waited so long to speak openly. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Fans gathered outside Garden Lodge, leaving flowers, letters, and playing Queen songs on portable stereos. The media circus intensified, but now with a different energy. Not the predatory hunger of scandal seekers, but the mournful attention given to a beloved figure preparing for his final exit. Inside the mansion, Freddie faced his approaching death with the same theatrical flair that had defined his life. He refused to become a victim, insisting that those around him treat him as they always had. He made jokes, told stories, and continued to be the center of attention, even as his body failed him. The final curtain. On November 24th, 1991, at 7 in the evening, Freddie Mercury's extraordinary life came to an end. He died peacefully at Garden Lodge, surrounded by the few people he had allowed into his most private moments. His partner Jim Hutton, his friend and assistant Joe Fanelli, his closest friend Mary Austin, and his bandmate John Deacon were there to witness the end of an era. The news broke within hours, and the world responded with a grief that seemed disproportionate until you understood what Freddie had represented. He wasn't just a rock star who had died, he was a symbol of artistic fearlessness, of the refusal to be contained by other people's expectations, of the triumph of individual vision over collective conformity. Outside Garden Lodge, the mountain of flowers grew higher throughout the night. Fans from around the world arrived to pay their respects, many of them openly weeping as they left their offerings. Radio stations worldwide played Queen songs continuously, and television networks scrambled to create documentaries about his life and impact. His bandmates, devastated by the loss of their creative leader and friend, struggled to find words adequate to express their grief. Brian May spoke of Freddie's courage in his final months, how he had continued to create even as his body failed. Roger Taylor remembered his infectious enthusiasm and his absolute commitment to excellence. John Deacon, always the most private member of the band, chose to let his bass lines speak for him. The music industry had lost more than just a great performer. It had lost its most fearless innovator. Artists who had been influenced by Queen came forward to share their memories and express their gratitude. From David Bowie to Elton John, from Annie Lennox to George Michael, the tributes painted a picture of an artist who had expanded the possibilities of what popular music could be and do. The immortal legacy. But what is legacy really? Is it the records sold, the awards won, the performances remembered? For Freddie Mercury, legacy became something more profound, the permission he gave others to be authentically themselves, regardless of what the world expected them to be. In the months and years following his death, Bohemian Rhapsody experienced a renaissance, introducing new generations to the power of his voice and vision. Young people who had never seen him perform live discovered his concerts through video recordings and found themselves transported by the same energy that had captivated audiences decades earlier. The Freddie Mercury tribute concert, held at Wembley Stadium the following April, became one of the largest benefit concerts in history. Artists from across the musical spectrum came together to honor his memory and raise money for AIDS research. When George Michael sang "Somebody to Love" and Elton John performed "The Show Must Go On," it became clear that Freddie's influence extended far beyond his own recordings. Perhaps more importantly, his openness about his sexuality and his battle with AIDS helped break down barriers and reduce stigma. By living authentically and refusing to hide who he was, even when it might have been safer to do so, he provided a model of courage that extended far beyond the entertainment industry. The band Queen, after a period of mourning and uncertainty, found ways to continue honoring his memory while creating new music. Their collaboration with Paul Rodgers and later with Adam Lambert showed that while Freddie's voice was irreplaceable, the spirit he had brought to their music could still inspire new generations of performers and audiences. The eternal voice. Today, more than 3 decades after his death, Freddie Mercury's influence continues to grow. Bohemian Rhapsody streams on digital platforms introduce his artistry to listeners who weren't born when he died. The biographical film bearing the song's title brought his story to mainstream audiences worldwide, reminding them of the power of artistic vision backed by unstoppable determination. But perhaps his greatest legacy lies in the countless individuals who found the courage to be themselves after discovering his music. The young singer who refuses to conform to industry expectations, the performer who embraces their unique style despite criticism, the person who finds strength in their differences rather than shame. They all carry a piece of Freddie's spirit forward. His voice, that four-octave miracle that could whisper with tender vulnerability or roar with the power of a hurricane, continues to echo through time. Every time someone chooses authenticity over conformity, every time an artist pushes beyond the boundaries of what's considered possible, every time a performer treats their audience as worthy of their absolute best effort, Freddie's influence lives on. What would he think of his enduring impact? Perhaps he would flash that mischievous smile, the one that suggested he had always known that greatness was possible if you were brave enough to reach for it. Perhaps he would remind us that the show must go on, that art outlasts the artist, that the human capacity for creating beauty is stronger than any force that seeks to diminish it. In the end, Freddie Mercury achieved the only immortality that truly matters. Not the preservation of his physical form, but the continuation of his spirit in every voice that refuses to be silenced, every performance that treats the audience as deserving of magic, every song that dares to be different. The boy from Zanzibar who became the king of rock and roll taught us that we all have the capacity for greatness if we're willing to embrace who we truly are. His voice may have been silenced, but the echo continues forever, a reminder that we are all capable of creating something beautiful, something meaningful, something that outlasts our brief time on this stage we call life. And somewhere in that echo, in the space between the silence and the song, Freddie Mercury continues his eternal performance, still daring us to live without fear, to love without shame, and to sing as if the whole universe is listening. Because maybe, just maybe, it is.